Reads from Mark chapter 15 and verses 33 to 47.
And when the 6th hour was come, there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. And at the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which is, being interpreted, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And some of them that stood by, when they heard it, said, Behold, he calleth Elias. And went round and filled a sponge full of vinegar, and put it on a reed, and gave him to drink, saying, Let alone, let us see whether Elias will come to take him down. And Jesus cried with a loud voice, and gave up the ghost. And the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom. And when the centurion who stood over against him saw that he so cried out, and gave up the ghost, he said, Truly this man was the Son of God. There were also women looking on afar off, among whom was Mary Magdalene, and Mary the mother of James, the Less, and of Joseph, and Salome, who also, when he was in Galilee, followed him, and ministered unto him, and many other women which came up with him into Jerusalem. And now, when the evening was come, because it was the day of preparation, that is, the day before the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea, an honourable counsellor, which also waited for the kingdom of God, came and went in boldly unto Pilate, and prayed the body of Jesus. And Pilate marvelled if he were already dead, and calling unto him the centurion, he asked him whether he had been any while dead. And when he knew it of the centurion, gave the body to Joseph. And he bought fine linen, and took him down, and wrapped him in the linen, and laid him in a sepulchre which was hewn out of the rock, and rolled a stone into the door of the sepulchre. And Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of Joseph beheld where he was laid. And God will bless him.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Right. Thanks very much for the reading, Dorothy. I appreciate that. And we're almost now coming to the end. Can you believe we've been going through Mark? It's been some time, hasn't it, to go through it. And we'll take it, I think, in the book of Romans, Martin Lloyd-Jones took 8 years. Imagine, that's 8 years, probably. There we are. There's a tremendous sense of concentration that he's got. I don't think I could ever do that type of thing, but there we are. I just wanted to follow through what we did this morning, really, where we looked at people around the cross, and we looked at the soldiers that were there, the thieves that were there, Simon of Cyrene, he was there, the women and the rulers as well, and the different representatives. And out of each of those groups came people who became stalwart followers of Christ, made confessions either at that very moment at the cross, or we find as the gospel unfolds in the gospel account and in the book of Acts and other letters in the New Testament, we find that some of those that we come across at the cross of Jesus continue to walk for the rest of their days in the light of what Jesus had done for them. And what Mark does in this chapter, mentioned this morning, he really puts the brakes on, and he breaks the day down into 6 sections, really. And you can see it as you go through each and every section. He really slows it down just to explain what's happening or what has happened. And he doesn't really comment. If you notice that in the Gospels, there's very little coverage of the redemptive powers in the cross of Christ. Have you noticed that? All they talk about is the actual event. Very few of the Gospel writers mention why he died. Very few of them. If you take Mark, probably the key verse in the whole of in the whole of the book is Mark 10, verse 45. It talks of the Son of Man, and that he did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. That's one of the only quotations that we can turn around and say, well, he's talking about the redemptive powers of the cross of Calvary. Very little is said, surprisingly, in the Gospel accounts as to what that's picked up later as we go into the book of Acts and as we go into the letters of Paul and the others, and they explain some of the values that come forth from the death of Christ. So we're going to look at the day being broken up. We look at early morning, we look at evening, we look at the 3rd hour, the 6th hour, and the 9th hour. That happened on this day where Mark speaks about the death of Christ, and he breaks it down. In the first part, he talks about the early morning. The second call of the rooster that morning sealed Peter's 3rd denial in the courtyard. And at that moment, the Gospel writers tell us that Peter was thinking about these things as the roosters sounded. Thoughts were in his mind recalling what Jesus had said. And then it says this, that Peter noticed that Jesus had turned around to look at him. And he went out and wept bitterly. He went out and wept bitterly. This was early in the morning. What a start of the day, isn't it? What a start of the day. Sometimes we hope that the day will start off well. Every Saturday we have a paper and I do the crossword. And I say to Judith, I said, well, if I finish it today, it's going to be a good day. Go by that. Saturday's never a good day. Because I never finish it. But this day started off with a denial. We're not told the exact time, we're just told it's early in the morning. It's probably around about 6 o'clock. And as Jesus turns, Peter recalls what Jesus had said to him, and he went out and wept bitterly. Immediately, the Gospel writers tell us that they took Jesus and bound him and led him to Pilate. He had been interrogated through the night, taunted through the night, asked to swear an oath, which we are not supposed to do. He had been smitten by the high priest, and he'd been smitten by his courts that were there helping him to try and bring Jesus to a place of confession where they could stop him and all these different things. They'd had enough of it now. They felt they had enough evidence to go to Pilate. And so they immediately bound him and led him off to Pilate. That's the beginning of the day, early morning. Such a gloomy, gloomy picture is painted for us by the Gospel of Mark. It's a day that's not going to go well at all. When he'd been arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, he had turned and said to his captors, "This is your hour and the power of darkness. This is your hour. My hour will come, but this belongs to you now." And so began, in that early morning, they set off and led him to Pilate. At the dawning of the day, dark clouds were coming over the horizon. But if we go 3 days later, we find a corresponding time. In fact, very early in the morning, before sun was up, when it was still dark, Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and Salome, went up to the tomb, and they found it empty. What a change, isn't it? Before the cross, darkness and gloom. After the cross, on the resurrection, light and hope. What a difference it makes. That's all we're going to look at tonight, is the difference at the early morning, the evening, the 3rd hour, the 6th hour, and the 9th hour. What it was on the day of the cross and what it was after. Now, they're not all taking place on the resurrection day. Some things I just mentioned at these particular times in the New Testament. We'll have a little look at them and see what they say. But that which seemed to show that there were dark clouds on the horizon, rushing nearer and nearer, 3 days later, it was an empty tomb, and Christ was risen. And the 3 girls there found a tomb that was empty. They met an angel. They met the Lord before anyone else had met them. He met them and spoke to them. What a difference an early morning can make to us. A good early morning start or a bad early morning start. We're going to go to the evening, not to miss out the other day, but just because it just fits in well. In the evening, it says simply this: when evening came, Joseph of Arimathea took the body of Jesus and laid him in a tomb. It's a sad moment. You hear of him and you read of Nicodemus, you hear of the women that were standing or following closely, watching what was happening, and they laid him in a tomb. And yet 3 days later, we read this. John speaking, at evening, when the doors were shut, where the disciples were assembled for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood in the midst and said to them, "Peace be with you." You can have a day sometimes that starts off bad. You can have a day that continues like that through the day, and at the evening time, when everyone else is gone, or maybe just those that are close to you are with you, and you sit down, and it feels almost that you've been laid in a tomb, or you've laid someone in a tomb. But you can have an evening 3 days later, when that same Christ that had been laid in the tomb is now risen. Amen. The tomb is no longer full, it's empty, and he stands in the midst. The doors might be shut, the windows might be shut, your heart might be shut, your mind might be shut, but he can still come and stand in the midst and speak peace into your soul. Have you locked him out? Has there come that despair, that disappointment, that frustration, where you've looked back and think, but I thought so much good would come, but it's come to nothing. And you lock up your heart, you lock up your soul, you shut your mind and you shut your heart to the workings of God, but he can still come and stand in the midst of us and speak peace to your soul. What a wonderful change those 3 days make. A morning that started so badly becomes a morning that begins so brightly. An evening that shows that everything that they had hoped for is now laid in a tomb. Is suddenly 3 days later is a tomb that is empty and is now one where the disciples are gathered together and he stands in the midst of them, speaking peace to their hearts. Let's have a little look at the 3rd hour. At the 3rd hour, I think it says in one of the verses there, at the 3rd hour, they crucified him. The soldiers divided his garments and cast lots for them. And Jesus prayed, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do." We move from the morning to the 3rd hour. It's 9 o'clock in the morning. That's when they crucified him. 9 o'clock in the morning. He had been up through the night, being interrogated, being taunted, being beaten, being mocked, being spat upon, all those different things. And then through the day through the night he'd been scourged and all the different things that we looked at this morning. And now, at 9 o'clock in the morning, he's crucified. Amazingly, they cast lots for his garments. They divide the garments among themselves and they cast lots for the main garment that was weaved together. So they weren't going to rip it up, they were going to cast lots. They were playing dice at the foot of the cross. Amazingly, nearly all the gospel writers record this particular part of the crucifixion. All of them seem to refer to it. It seems nothing of consequence really, but they all seem to point to it. The prophets had said that he would be crucified. The prophets had said that they would cast lots for his garments. And the prophet had also said that he would make intercession for the transgressors. And there he is, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. In that third hour, scriptures were being fulfilled, left, right, and center. When we go into the New Testament or into the book of Acts, we find another day when the scriptures were being fulfilled. And that too was at the third hour. Peter is asked the question on the day of Pentecost, are these men drunk? And Peter answers and said, well, these men cannot be drunk, seeing it is but the third hour of the day, 9 o'clock in the morning. But this is that which is spoken of by the prophet Joel. It shall come to pass in the last days, said the prophet, that God would pour out of his Spirit upon all flesh. You see, that third hour can be an hour when God can fulfill his promise to you and to me. What was something so degrading to Christ becomes something that is so relevant to us. Because the very thing that he died for, to give his Spirit into our hearts, is fulfilled on the day of Pentecost, at the third hour of the day, when they were there praying and seeking the face of Christ out of God. And there his Spirit was poured out. We find this for the third hour. We're told at the 6th hour, darkness covered all the land. In the days of Moses, we find in Egypt that again Egypt was covered with darkness, a great veil, a darkness that could be felt, it said. You could almost touch it. And remember one of our holidays down in West Wales, when we went down to Dale, down in the far west, we were told that it was the driest area in Wales, but it rained every day except one. Roger and Dorothy came down. And the kids were sleeping in our bedroom. It was we always called it from that day forward, the creepy cottage. It had a little living room in there, and every time I went in there, I felt sick because there was all these books in there, and they'd never been opened, and that stale smell, and you just felt your stomach reaching, I don't know. So we sat out in the kitchen for the whole week. Thankfully, Roger and Dorothy came down and joined with us. And we slept peacefully, because we used to race into bed, because the last one had to switch a light off. It was so dark. The number of times I banged my head, because there was a sloping ceiling on there. As soon as the farmer shut off the yard light, you couldn't see a hand in front of you. A darkness that could be felt. But in those days, we're told that the children of Israel had light in their homes. But there's no light here. At the 6th hour, darkness covered all the land. It covered all the land. It was a darkness that continued for 3 hours to the 9th hour. No comment is made in relation to that 6th hour other than darkness. No illumination at all. Everything is veiled. Nothing is seen. It seems from what the gospel writers say, nothing is said. The darkness brought an eeriness perhaps to the whole setting, I don't know. But we find there in the New Testament, in the book of Acts, at that 6th hour, we're told on another occasion, Peter went up on the housetop to pray at the 6th hour. And at that 6th hour, as he prayed, a tremendous sense of light came within his soul. You see, what can be before the cross? What can be darkness? After the cross can be light. You see, the cross makes all the difference. It takes away the darkness. And Peter, up on that house, on the top of the roof, praying at the 6th hour. Mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the midday sun. But so did Peter. There we are. He's not a bad one to be numbered with in the midday sun. Up on the roof he goes, Probably had some sort of gazebo type thing on top, I would have thought, that covered the shelter in from the midday sun. But he prayed, and as he prayed, light came within his soul that illuminated his heart, that allowed him to see what God really wanted to do. To reach out and touch every soul that was there. That there was not to be a corner of the world left untouched, if possible. That the love of God might bring a message of hope to the rest of the world. And on that rooftop at the 6th hour, we're told as Peter prayed, the heavens opened. And a vision was given to him. The vision was so great, we are told. And Peter, feeling so unilluminated, not understanding what God was trying to say to him, the vision was repeated 3 times. And when he came down from that vision, he found faith within his heart to follow a group of men that said, there's a Gentile asking for you to go and explain something. And he went. He preached the gospel to them. And as he preached, the Holy Spirit came down amongst them. They all got saved and filled with the Spirit on the day they got saved. There was so much liberty there, so much freedom. There was an angel there speaking to Cornelius, and Cornelius obeyed what the angel said. Cornelius speaks to his servants, and the servants obey what Cornelius said. They go to Peter, and Peter has had an announcement from God, and he obeys what God says to him. And they come to Peter and says, Peter, there's a man calling you. And he follows them. There's so much obedience about that God has free liberty to interrupt the meeting. He doesn't even get to his high point in the sermon. He cuts in on it before there's so much eagerness there. Because someone prayed. Coincidentally, it was the 6th hour. The 6th hour at Calvary was a dark, dark moment. The 6th hour on that rooftop was an enlightening moment for Peter. The 9th hour, we told his darkness continued until the 9th hour. As it began to ebb, it would seem, as it began to just draw back just a little, no little pockets of light. Remember that thing that Roger said about little, what is it, of light in the dark? Remember that little saying you come up with once? You remember that one?
Oh, yes. Robert Stevenson seeing this upstairs in the bedroom. And he's very, very quiet. And his nanny thought, I wonder what he's up to. She went upstairs, and there he was over by the bedroom window, kneeling on like an ottoman. And she said, what are you doing? He said, I'm watching a man making holes in the dark. With the lamp like that.
There we are. There were still no lights showing. Still no light showing. And we're told this, that about the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me? And now we understand why the darkness has been there. Because there's been a breach in the relationship between the Father and the Son. A breach that has taken place, that all creation, if it saw, would have fallen back in amazement at what had happened. My God, why have you forsaken me? We're told by the prophet Isaiah, the iniquity of us all came to meet upon him. He drew it all upon himself. For the iniquity of every single person since time began to the present day that we are here and beyond. Every sin that's committed. That doesn't mean people are going to respond to him, man. But the cruelty of it separated the Father from the Son in their relationship. God was still there in his presence. You can't make God unpleasant because he's present everywhere. David almost argues the point, even if I make my bed in hell, you are there. His presence is still there. If his presence wasn't there, how did the thief get converted? If his presence wasn't there, how could the centurion and the soldiers see that this was the Son of God? If his presence wasn't there, how could Simon Cyrene become a man that would follow Christ for the rest of his days? His presence was there at Calvary. Yes, they were the bulls of Bashan. Yes, they were dogs and lions around him, baying at him. But Christ found that the Father's presence was there. But the breach in the relationship was deep, but so deep, so deep, so grievous, that there was a separation between Father and Son. Because our sin had broken the relationship. And so the darkness there. In that darkness, for 3 hours, he bore the brunt of that sin that was resting upon his shoulders. And he cried, my God, why have you forsaken me? We're told at that same hour that he cried out once more. For some, he says, it is finished. Another gospel writer says that he cried, into my, into your hand. I commend my spirit. And so these cries, but at that 9th hour, the Son of God died. He died. At that 9th hour. And the darkness lifted, and they saw him there. One says it must have been a tragic sight to see that man that had done so much good hanging there on a tree. And so we find him at that 9th hour. Just after Pentecost, we're told of another 9th hour. We're told that Peter and John went up to the temple to pray, it being the hour of prayer, the 9th hour, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And as they go up to the temple, they find there a man that has never walked before, 40 years of age. He had no strength in his ankle bones. The one writer says that he was impotent in his feet. We find the same word used by Paul in the book of Romans, chapter 8, and he says this, what the law could not do, what the law was impotent to do. What that man had in his feet was this, could not do. That's what it means. It could not do in his feet. He had no strength in his feet at all. And Peter and John at the 9th hour went up to the temple to pray. And having entered into the temple courtyard, they found there a man that had never walked. And in that wonderful name of Jesus, they saw that man rise up, walking and leaping and praising God. His sins are forgiven. And 4,000 people come to know the knowledge or have that knowledge of Christ within their hearts on that same day. What a wonderful thing God can do, isn't it? You might be in a dark hour at the moment. It could be early morning, you know. It could be the 3rd hour of the day, just the beginning of it. It could be the 6th hour. It could be halfway along now. It could be the 9th hour where it's coming to its end. But please be assured of this, that if it be morn or at even, if it be the 3rd hour, the 6th hour, the 9th hour, there is a corresponding hour that God can give to your heart. Of light, of hope, of peace, of joy, of those things that your soul craves for. We find that Calvary brings together our absolute inability to save ourselves. Calvary is needed to save us. That's why it's there. It's not there just to make us good, it's there to save us. That's the first thing. To make us different. And with Calvary, once we come to Calvary, new light begins to open up for us. I don't know where you are. It could be the beginning of a bad patch for you. It could be the end of a bad patch. It could be that 3rd hour, it could be that 6th hour, it could be that 9th hour. You know where you are. But let me say this, there is an hour where it is God's hour, that he might be such a blessing to you through Christ at Calvary. There we are, a little bit different. I did wonder how we would go, but I trust that God might use those words to encourage your heart to see that Christ really cares and went all the way for each and every one of us. Thank you.